Hello and welcome to another episode of Rebel City Podcast. This week's guest, we've got, I'm not going to say, fire extinguisher, like
Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion. Last week I was saying to Matt, I was like, I think I must have said it about 4 times before. I was like, Paul, it's no Extinguish Rebellion, it's Extinction Rebellion. Like, okay, aye. Yet again, my English fails me, as it does.
It's kind of what I'm here for.
Daily.
That's what
anyway.
I'm here for.
I didn't catch your last name, Matt, sorry.
It's Matt Noble.
Matt Noble. So, welcome to Rebel City, mate.
Thanks for having me on.
Do you want to just tell the people, obviously your name's Matt Noble, but just a wee bit about yourself?
So, I'm a computer programmer. I got involved with Extinction Rebellion last year. The last few years, probably like many people, I'd seen all the articles popping up on social media about the latest climate science and how bad it's getting, and it's like, fuck, this is serious. This is an actual existential threat to our civilization. And you read that and you think, oh, this is terrible, I need to do something. And you're like, what the fuck can I do? Like, I already cycle to work. There's a sort of limit on what any one individual can do, and it's just so disempowering to feel like there's this horrible threat hanging over, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so you just feel that sort of anxiety about it, that there's nothing you can do. And then last year, around about the start of the year, I saw popped up on my Facebook feed this post from Greta Thunberg. At this point in time, I had no idea who she was, but someone had shared this really long post from her, basically responding to a lot of criticism she'd had and sort of telling the story of how her protest had started. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Like, this is a really inspiring thing. Like, one person started this protest and it spread. And then, like, a week later, I see an event on Facebook for school climate strikes in George Square, and I'm like, shit, this is happening in Glasgow. That's brilliant. So
the algorithm actually worked.
So I managed to convince a couple of my colleagues to come along to George Square on our lunch break and just sort of take it in. And I was like, wow, this is brilliant. This is inspiring.
I think that was quite cool that, that the young people all across the world kind of made the point quite eloquently that what's left of the world is theirs, and like, although they might not be enfranchised enough to vote, that they weren't going to just sit about and let governments ruin their futures, essentially. Like, I thought it was quite poignant to see it coming for kids for a change.
Aye. So yeah, it was so inspiring, and I then noticed that these Facebook events telling you about the climate strike in George Square come along. The host of these events was a group called Extinction Rebellion. I hadn't heard of them either. But I was like, oh, that's quite interesting, and followed the page and then saw they were putting up like weekly public meetings, and I was like, I'll try and get along to one of those meetings. And then before you know it, I'm involved in going along and helping them plan actions and helping run the social media. So that's kind of
where you started.
Where I started.
Cool. And again, so for anybody, I mean, obviously, it's pretty obvious that there's a climate element to what you're doing. Like, what is the sort of core message that Extinction Rebellion's got for anybody who's been living in a cave for like the last 18 months or so?
So the core message is that climate change is real. It's happening. It's really fucking bad. It's not just something that is going to happen in the future. It's something that's already happening. And the narrative that we're getting from our governments, from our media institutions, is not telling the full story. It's not, they're downplaying how serious it is.
I mean, there's schools of scientific thought that say, the point of no return is in the next 10 to 15 years. I think those are, I don't know if those are conservative estimates or whether they're accurate or whatever, but I've definitely seen the sort of 10 to 15, I think it was 12-year mark was mentioned quite a few times in recent years. And if that's not a pressing issue, then I don't really know what is. I mean, that's, all being well, even with, Glasgow's mortality rates, that's still technically likely to be in my lifetime, you know what I mean?
What would any government have to gain out of no telling us the truth about it? Because if it's something that's so pressing, which it is, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a climate denier, and I don't think Matt is in any way. Like, I believe the science. Why do they not tell us?
I think it's one of these cases where the problem is so big that they genuinely don't know how to face up to it. And so the easier thing is to stick your head in the sand. the thing that really jolted a lot of people into action was the IPCC report in 2018, which basically said, as you were saying, we've got until 2030 to cut our emissions in half. Now, if you look at a graph of global carbon emissions, you might imagine from the last 10, 20 years with a lot of talk about recycling, a lot of talk about carbon footprint, that graph is starting to go down.
Yeah.
But it's not. That graph is still increasing exponentially year on year.
I think this was something I've seen on your website, and the build-up to this was that, like, it's ridiculous to expect emissions to dip when the economy is entirely based on the increased production model. You know what I mean? Like, so the two can't go hand in hand.
So that graph shows the line of best fit, which is actually really close to the actual data. The line of best fit is exponential increase of 1.65% per annum, which is pretty close to what you're looking at for economic growth.
Yeah.
So I think it would be quite hard not to conclude that there's a direct correlation between economic growth and carbon emissions. So another reason why it's very difficult for politicians and governments to actually really face up to the problem is that they are so wedded to this idea of economic growth. It's how they are measured. They haven't yet found out a way to sell themselves as a government you should vote for without saying we're going to grow the economy.
There must be some kind of, I mean, it feels like we've been having sort of perpetual boom and bust since
when the economy began.
Yeah, but the idea that we can keep growing economically, and when we've sort of like topped out, like, I mean, how many devices can we have? How many laptops? How many mobile phones? Like, there's an estimated like £10 billion worth of tech in people's cupboards. So how can we continue to expect to grow and grow and grow? This is part of like even just wider politics, not just about like climate, that they constantly talk about, and they're expecting economic just constant growth. There needs to be a point where we stop growing. Do you know what I mean? Where we actually take a look at like, what are we doing? Like, why do we need it? Why do we need the market to keep growing other than just to keep putting money in pockets? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And that's, you know, your mobile phone probably breaks about once a year and you have to buy a new one. Even if it doesn't break, the new one's bigger and better and more efficient. It's like, I mean, your mobile phone 10 years ago was powerful enough, but because of something called Moore's Law, computers get twice as powerful every 2 years. So it's now 30 times as powerful as it was 10 years ago.
I'm saying
10 years ago it was good enough. 10 years ago it was good enough. Why does it need to be so much more powerful today?
Other than they just want to sell you something else, which is...
And that's exactly it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sort of answers this question, but why does it seem to be... Well, this seems to have polarised, like everything, into left and right, where it seems that the left offer sort of like the Green New Deal and their climate sort of, they're ready to go, they're ready for action, whereas the right is just sort of like trying to basically downplay. I mean, there's a whole mass of like climate denial happening where the sort of top scientists are telling you one thing and your politicians are claiming to be more...
The Oval Office doesn't believe in it, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think it's because it's snowing outside his window that's the same thing as global warming being a myth, and you're like, can somebody sit this guy down and have the conversation you have with a 5-year-old that explains the difference between environment and weather? You know what I mean? Like, I found it quite interesting as well when we talk about denial, and there was the recent example, I don't know if you've seen it, about the lassie who's running for the leadership of the Scottish Tories, and she was talking about secret reports about eco-friendly cows and how climate change was, and you were just like, a secret report about like eco-friendly cows in Scotland was, you know, even for climate change denial, a wee bit out there, and obviously like in the last week or so. So, it's like, it's still there. It's not something that we've no managed to get the message across that, you know, this emergency, and ideally, you know, we do need like, in essence, like a green industrial revolution. You know what I mean? Like, we need to re-key everything we do away from the fossil fuels and towards a more sort of green and sort of viable economy. And like that in itself, think about the amount of jobs, the amount of skills that creates. Like, I think the incentive's there to do it, but I just don't get why there's no political will behind it, because I don't know if we're just like placekeeping now until the people who own, you know, fossil fuels are ready to diversify into like a green market or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, I think one of the things we need to understand is the power that we're up against.
Yeah.
So Exxon commissioned a report in 1977 where some very, very smart scientists clearly predicted that by this point in time we would be at 415 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we would be about 1 degree Celsius warmer, and that's exactly where we are. 40 years later. Like, they predicted pretty much exactly the point we would be at.
Right.
Now, a lot of environmental organisations maybe didn't realise we would be in quite such a bad state at this point in time. Now, at the point where they figured that out, they could have chosen to say, we need to get out of fossil fuels, this is really bad. But instead, they decided, well, we need to protect our profits, we need to invest in lobbying, we need to invest in propaganda efforts to muddy the waters, to promote this sort of denial narrative. And so they've known for a long time that we would at some point in time get to this moment where where you can no longer deny the science of it. Presumably they've prepared for this moment as well. They've prepared for their new message. Now that everyone accepts climate change is real and they're causing it, they've now got a new message that, oh, we're going to be sustainable. We're going to have zero emissions in our operations. Well, it doesn't matter if you've got zero emissions in your operations, because your operation is to produce and sell fossil fuels that someone else is going to burn. So what does it matter?
Do you know what? I've actually never thought about that before. That a zero emissions.
So what did Exxon do with that report back in the 70s? Is this one of the ones where they've just kept it to themselves? Didn't share it with anybody?
Same kind of chat as the tobacco industry like 10 years before. You know what I mean? Like, they knew it was coming and they just did exactly the same stuff with lobbyists and threw money at the problem and hoped for the best. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. What do you think of I mean, like you're saying, you're up against big money, big industry, big government. I mean, this is all like, and it's so deeply entrenched now, like everything when it comes to like the media and the government, and then like you say the oil and gas and the alcohol and tobacco industries and stuff. It's all just basically a big massive sort of bunch of mates that are just helping each other out and giving each other like a leg up. So what do you think are the chances that they can actually like break that lobby and break that sort of message? Or do you think it's already happening? Because I mean, a part of the what I love about the girl Greta is that she's literally got every middle-aged guy and up like fucking wetting themselves to like jump on and just slag her and just denounce her to be whether it be her autism, whether it be this is her parents, and she's look at her parents, they were like this, and they're just
very
feeding
much
her
a lot of shoot the
information.
messenger going on. There's no very many people trying to like legitimately like debunk anything that she says. It's all about personal attacks on her. Which
do you think that that's a sign that the tide is turning? That there's more people getting engaged in climate change? There
definitely is, but it's still not easy to win that fight because there's so many people engaged, but we don't have the power. We still don't have the billions of dollars.
That's it. Yeah, but that was what I was going to say earlier on when I was talking about the left and the right, was that would you have rather that it was a bipartisan sort of subject rather than it being something else that falls into I support Brexit, therefore I need to be a climate denier, because this is like identity politics is almost like ruining every argument and every nuance that we can have in society, where it just falls down this line of would they believe
would they my side want me?
Would they my side? Would you have rather that it didn't go like that? But then
should be. I mean, the survival of us and our planet should not be like a party political issue. I don't think personally. You know what I mean? Like, survival is for everybody, and like it's an absolute no-brainer. You know what I mean? Like, for me anyway. But again, there are literally millions out there that don't agree. You know what I mean? For whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be, and that's. So we've got 3 key demands that we make, and our third demand is for a citizens' assembly. And part of the reason, one of the things that's good about that demand, I can't say the reason why we came up with it because I wasn't involved at the time, but one of the things that's really good about it is we don't have to align with any particular political ideology. We don't have to propose any particular solution. We can talk about potential solutions and say, if you did this, it would have this much benefit, but we don't have to say, right, this is what you're going to do. Our proposition is that the government institutes a citizens' assembly. They create a legal commitment to abide by whatever decisions that assembly comes up with, and then that assembly would be formed of a pseudo-random selection of people from the population, so not completely random, because you've got to make sure it's representative of all demographics. then that group of ordinary people would be advised by experts. You'd have a lot of people who would come in and say, this is the situation, this is why we need to act, this is how much of an impact we need to make, and here are some options for actions that could be taken. And then the idea is that that group would then make a decision that would be representative of the population as a whole.
This is something that I've heard elsewhere. I think that the Scottish Government talk about citizens' assemblies being more widely used in a sort of very sort of general basis recently, I think. So is this something that's alongside that idea, or is it just the way things seem to be moving generally? Is that, I think you'd raised the point about, power being, trying to be filtered to a more local level and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the part of the problem, we've got this crisis where, as I say, we've got 10 years to cut our emissions in half, and it's hard to see how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
As things stand, we've got one election in 2025 at UK level, or 2024, and then another one in 2029, and then we're at 2030, where we've got to have already halved our emissions.
Yeah.
We as the people don't have enough opportunities to have our say. At the same time, you've got politicians making a legally binding commitment to get to net zero by 2050, knowing full well that they're not going to be in office by that point in time, or possibly not even alive anymore. So it really feels like our whole democratic system is not fit for purpose. It's certainly in facing this challenge, probably in facing a lot of other challenges as well.
Oh yeah,
I feel like this might be actually the biggest opportunity for us to look at the democratic system, and why do we? I mean, you hear a lot of sort of complaints about like every 4 years. So if you get somebody in power that starts to do something good, I mean, I've got no doubt that the current Tory government or the previous two Tory governments, David Cameron's or Theresa May's, they've probably done something that's good. I've not seen much yet, or I've not heard much yet, but I live in my echo chamber, so they've probably done something good. But if our government starts to have sort of like good push in the right direction for something, 4 years later it just stops because there's another person that gets put in. And one of the things that frustrates me is the person that gets put in isn't a fucking expert, and they don't know anything about. I mean, they're career politicians that have done a politics degree and maybe get a PhD or whatever, but they're not getting the right people in the right positions, and that's like a big sort of frustration. On the sort of topic of government, like, what do you expect of the Scottish Government? So what are the expectations for the organisation on our government? Because we get a lot of sort of spotlight that gets shone on the Scottish Government as we talk about independence, and we've got very vocal politicians and MSPs. So what's the expectation?
So we're making three demands, and it's the same three demands that we're making of or more or less the same three demands that we're making of the UK government. We are asking for the government to tell the truth, to declare a climate emergency and tell the truth about the scale of that emergency. Now, they've declared a climate emergency, but they've kind of stopped at that point in time and not then gone out. And what we're looking for them to do is to work with the media and actually say what that means and really make sure people understand this is serious. This is the solutions that are required need to be big. Our second demand is for them to make a legally binding commitment to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2025. Our third demand is, as I say, for them to institute a citizens' assembly. Now, on the Scottish Government, obviously, we're not independent. There are certain things the Scottish Government doesn't have power over. For example, the Scottish Government doesn't have power over the fossil fuel industry. So there might be certain limits on what they can achieve, but they do have power over transport, which is a huge, huge part of the carbon footprint, and something which it's one area where we can create a much better quality of life for people, certainly in cities, while massively reducing the carbon footprint.
Definitely.
When I was coming over here, I used to live in this part of town. I don't anymore, but I was just shocked at how much gridlock there was in the roads.
Crazy.
And you think about how much time people are wasting sitting in their own metal bubble, and that's not contributing to people's quality of life. It is contributing to carbon emissions.
Absolutely. So what's the solution?
Well, there's options, including you can redesign how people live, like have more of your local services, more of your jobs closer to where you live. It's probably more of a longer term thing. You can provide the infrastructure for people to walk and cycle more easily and more comfortably.
Yeah.
You can provide better public transport, which is a huge thing. In Glasgow, our public transport is pretty poor.
They're making strides on
Yeah.
I would say the City Council's made strides recently on 2 of those 3. I think the City Living is, even in the last couple of days, they were saying they were trying to increase the population of the city centre by double, up to like 40,000. And I think when we spoke to David and the City Council, the City Chambers, he was saying that, obviously the pedestrianisation of the city centre was something that was happening sort of at a pace as well. But again, the transport system is something that is in desperate need of looking at. I mean, electric, is that the way forward for a public fleet?
Oh, for a public, yeah. Electric cars are often put forward as a solution, and what people need to appreciate is that every electric car that you make, it's got a big, massive battery in it. The materials for that battery are coming from some horrible, horrible mine somewhere in the global south, where the human rights abuses are horrific, the environmental consequences of that mining is horrific, and we simply can't just say, oh, we're going to reduce our emissions by doing all this damage in this other part of the world.
Absolutely. It's almost like tricking us.
Cars a bit of a vanity thing, isn't it?
It's like tricking the population of the West into thinking that we're doing the right thing and making ethical choices by buying an electric car or buying a hybrid car, when the actual the reality of the situation is that people and the planet are suffering to supply you with that new car.
So you see things like in Edinburgh, and obviously the tram system has been massively controversial for various other reasons. I don't know if environment is one of them or no. But again, you've got Manchester as well, make use of trams. And is this maybe part of where the answer is in terms of like electric public transport? You know what I mean? Like, because I know that charging and all these types of things are taking like leaps and bounds, and again, like that exponential growth on computer technology, you've got to imagine that things like electronic cars, electronic sort of public transport, and the charging and infrastructure is also on a sort of similar gradient. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like electric public transport is a big part of the solution, and also talking about technology. You look at things like Uber, you've got technology being applied to provide people with private transport. You don't have technology being applied to anything like the same level to provide public services, to provide public transport. You don't have, for instance, something that really, really annoys me. Every winter, people will post up on social media these screenshots from this app that tells you where all the gritters are, because they've got all the amusing names, like you've got Gritter Thunberg now, Andy Flurry and all this, so it's very funny. But that is an app, someone has developed that app as a public service to car users for the 2 or 3 days a year when they need to know whether the road's been gritted or not. It's the exact same technology that could tell you where your bus is. But that's not provided as a service.
Or even, crunch the numbers on of the bus routes the most efficient way through traffic, etc., and so on and so forth. Like you could put it involved in city planning, essentially.
Use the data that you get every time someone comes on a bus. If you've got a smart card system so that people tap on and tap off, then you get that full data of exactly what journeys are being taken, and you can start to improve the quality of your public transport.
Definitely get behind some of that. Like technology does seem to be something that we should be able to rely on. I know it's one of the bigger industries that are booming. I mean, I know obviously when Trump came in America, he tried to go down the road of coal and gas, but I think that we're going to find governments less and less involved in that, and hopefully more in this sort of green technology, because it's not just about the car, it's about the way we're using algorithms and the data that we generate to see what corners we can cut and how we can get there quicker, you know what I mean? But I think it kind of harking back to one of the other points earlier, like that's all great, and it'll be stuff that will be great to make cases with down the line, but no, fuck it, that's a wagon.
Lost the point.
I was there for a second, gone again. Sorry.
Is there any governments
every week?
Is there any governments on the planet that you feel are like a best practice on how they're implementing their climate, or is there any government out there that's actually got a decent climate crisis happening? Or are they all in the same? Are we all in the same bandwagon?
Not that sort of the climate crisis. You mean?
Well, you were asking for one to be declared and for it to be taken seriously, and for them to inform their people of the actual severity. Is there anybody out there that's actually doing that?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's kind of sad, really.
One of the things that really frustrates us in Extinction Rebellion Scotland is the Scottish government love to present themselves as climate leaders, and we're like, well, actually, you're not doing anywhere near enough. But you keep, it's greenwashing. They call themselves climate leaders, but the reality is, they probably are among the leaders. Like that, they might be the best of a bad bunch. I did see recently, apparently, the country that with the most sustainable economy is actually Cuba.
It's not a surprise to me that though, because that's like, they'll get 100% literacy and like loads of different free education, free healthcare, all the stuff that we're trying to fight for. And then that doesn't surprise me.
You take a country and you completely cut themselves off from America and consumerism, and guess what? They're much more sustainable as a result.
The one and only place in the world that communism ever worked.
Well, is that really like?
It's not to say that they work as a society, but they're more sustainable.
They're definitely highlights.
Is that really like the crux of the issue? Is this, and I hate to say this because it is really sort of like, it's a bit of a dog whistle, but is this capitalism's fault? Like, is this the type of thing that if we stop consuming, cut ourselves off for consumerism, maybe start to do things locally better, like more efficient, is that the type of thing that we need to be doing? Or is even that sort of too little?
We definitely need to change the system. This is what we're calling for, that the whole system needs to change. One of our 10 principles and values is that we openly challenge ourselves and the toxic system. Now, that's not to say that we are explicitly anti-capitalist, but we're certainly challenging it. We certainly are questioning everything about it. One of the things that I've been thinking about the last few days is that our whole economy, like our whole underlying philosophy in organising how we work for the last 200 years has been to make everything more efficient in terms of human time. So we try to make everything, like if you run a factory and you want to make the most possible amount of profit and your workers are making widgets, you want them to make as many widgets as possible in an hour because you're paying them for an hour's work. Now, we've spent 200 years trying to do everything in order to reduce the amount of our time that it takes to do things. And all of us in this modern world feel like we've got no time. How does that work? And what I don't know if I'm speaking for Extinction Rebellion as a whole here, but what certainly a lot of people think that we should be trying to do is our underlying philosophy shouldn't be minimising the amount of human time that something takes. It should be about maximising the resilience of our economy. So, for instance, if I was to have a back garden and I was to grow food in my back garden, it would take me a lot longer to grow a carrot than the amount of time it would take for an industrial farm to grow a carrot that I can buy in the supermarket. But if I'm growing it in my back garden, I'm more resilient. I'm not dependent on
that demand or supply.
Absolutely. I think we're starting to see some of this happen in this. I mean, I work in a corporate environment. We were talking off mic about the companies that we work for, we won't mention, but the three is work in a corporate environment. Well, not so much. Would you say that you're working at? Kinda.
Close
but
enough.
Anyway, I'm starting to hear sort of good noise about wellness and well-being, and it's basically been because they've finally cottoned on to the fact that people being unwell, I think something crazy like 60% of sickness calls and time that is wasted, money that is wasted, is because of either pressure to do with the job or just general well-being. And so they're starting to shift because it's affecting the sort of top line. So then now they're starting to...
The next place they're going to find their efficiencies is by managing people's wellness better than they did before.
And it's getting done probably in like a variety, sort of good, bad, and absolutely fucking terrible. I've got absolutely no doubt about it.
You've got the same way.
When it starts to... that's it. When it starts to hit the top line, corporations or the corporate world start to take notice. So do you think it needs to get to that point where because selling oil is always going to make them money, especially like before we come on, we're going to talk about like the subsidies, and I mean that's a racket to me. That is just like
we're paying you to poison us.
Exactly. But
twice paying you to dig it out and then paying you for it.
Absolutely. You know are we going to need to? Is it going to need to get to the extent where they start to lose money for them to actually make these changes that need to get done? And do you think that that's going to happen in time for 2030? Because, I mean, we're currently at 2020. It's like, 10 years, 2010 to 2020s went by for me like fucking that, and nothing much has really changed in that time.
No.
So I don't see this big, massive change happening, but yeah, so that
I think that's something that scares people. I think one of the things you must come up against, Mason, as you say, in terms of your principles, like challenge yourselves, like that's going to be something that's hard for a lot of people today on this, because the action that's required to make the difference that we're talking about here is drastic. Like, people need to change the way they live their lives in the modern world, and like businesses as well. Like, you talk about that, you know, impact, you know, financial and the bottom line. Like, I think we need to look at, you know, as you were talking about half mic beforehand, the food industry. We need to look at the clothing industry. I was watching a thing the other week about fast fashion.
Fast fashion, this
and
is
like
the new hot button topic.
The resources that they burn through to knock up £4 t-shirts for Topshop is fucking ridiculous. And you're like, do we need that? Could our economy, could our, you know, psyche be more robust to go, well, no, fuck that. I don't actually need Tat for Primark this week. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But these are big ones. But again, there's another level again above that, as you say, fossil fuels, governmental, like, and there's a lot of industrial countries still out there. Like, I wonder sometimes if, like, me, as I was saying before, like, boiling half a kettle or switching a light off when I'm not in a room is really the answer when so much of this industrial scale stuff is happening. Like, do we have means or any way to, like, regulate or interrupt it?
Well, one thing that the big companies that pollute have been really successful at, so there's a stat that there's 100 companies that are responsible for 71% of all the carbon emissions, going right back to the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that they've been really successful at is making us all think it's our fault. Like, making us think, as you say, I boiled too much water in that kettle, I didn't turn the light off.
Yeah.
I forgot to bring my plastic bag to the shop with me. I had to get another.
How dare you use that poly bag? You know what I mean?
And I mean, these things do make some difference. And
but if you're talking about that's part of what, 29% of all carbon emissions since the Industrial Revolution, I would surely the low hanging fruit is in this 71%.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's as I say, that's where they've been successful, is focusing on the individual. And one of the things that's really, really difficult, that has been a huge barrier to environmental groups bringing people on in terms of getting people involved or just getting people to be sympathetic with them, is that a lot of people, when they see environmental campaigners, they think we are attacking them. They think, oh, but, you know, so I don't eat a plant-based diet, I drive to work, you know, I flew to Mallorca last month, you know, I couldn't join up with you guys because I would be a hypocrite, because and then it's, of course, you get the people who disagree with us being like, you're a hypocrite because you've got a sandwich you just bought at Tesco in a plastic box there.
Or Greta flew to New York to speak to the UN, how dare she? And you're like, come on, man.
But she took a yacht. What a weirdo.
I know.
I think that's something that really needs to get out there, is that, like, because like you're saying, shaming people doesn't do anything for anybody. All it causes is division and anger. And I mean, one of the ones that jumps out to me is, I was reading something the other day where people were saying that you say you're a communist, but you just tweeted that for your iPhone. And you're kind of like, right, there is a hypocrisy in there, but at the same time, you need to engage in a modern world to get anything done. I mean, you're not going to change the way that big business or big government do things by basically living underground with no phone, and like, because then ultimately that's only, you're just going to cut yourself off. You need to engage. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't want to get off the topic of climate change too much, but there's a fallacy in that, because the internet was a research project by the United States military in the first place. The computers were invented by, you know, as part of public research. The internet was created by public research. You know, companies like Twitter have come in and monetized all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea that you could have a phone on the internet communicating with millions of people, that you couldn't have that without capitalism, is flawed.
Yeah.
But yeah, to come back to blaming and shaming, that's another of our 10 principles and values, is we don't blame and shame individuals, because if everyone was just to devote their energy to trying to minimise their own carbon footprint, you'd go insane.
Yeah.
Because you cannot live in this world without doing these things. You can't live in this world without a phone. Some people cannot not drive to work. Your choice is you drive to work or you don't have a job.
Yeah, you need to feed your family.
Your choice is maybe that you have to fly places as part of your job, or you don't have a job.
Yeah.
We can talk about a plant-based diet, but there's a lot of people who are not able to do that, or simply it costs more money. The cheapest options are not necessarily, are very often actually the cheapest options are the ones that are least healthy for the environment.
Yep.
Because those environmental costs are externalised.
Yeah. How much an impact do you think the plant-based diet actually has when you get, because this always happens, and I'm sure that it'll be one side versus another, and it'll be misinformation versus more misinformation. But when you hear about the bean, like the soy farms use just as much, and the carbon footprint for soy farms just the same as what it is. I don't even know if that's true, by the way. So don't.
Again, that's what we're saying. We don't know.
This is a misinformation. Is that you can have the plant-based diet, but ultimately it's the same thing. It doesn't make any difference, other than maybe the ethics of killing the animals, which is another reason for you to be vegan. I've been slowly but surely.
Also, vegetables don't do a lot of farming, which is like working with the cows into the cattle as the methane and stuff like that.
Is that not actually like almost like a myth?
I don't know
about the gas that the cows fart, because I've been pulled up in that one before.
Apparently they don't fart, they burp. But it's, the methane comes out of them anyway.
Right.
I've read some interesting things about this, about apparently cattle, if they are fed in a field with lots of diverse grasses in it, there's not anywhere near as much methane. It's when they're in a monoculture, that's when there's a lot more methane.
Okay.
But I'm not a scientist, and I honestly can't answer the question about
one of the statistics
soybeans.
about that. Going back to the point earlier about like the waste to get you to like the fast fashion or even the electric cars is that there's a crazy statistic where it's like almost £5 plant-based protein to produce £1 of meat protein. Okay. So to feed a cow, to get £1 of like meat protein that you eat, it takes £5 of plant-based protein, which is just mind-blowing when you're like, what the fuck?
The figures are
it's like dividing it by 5 just to get to this thing that we're used to. Like, this comes back to what you were saying, is it relies on us changing the way that we live our life. You're used to the beef. I get it, but stop fucking eating it, like, please, like, Jesus Christ.
I think when we were talking earlier on about engagement, that's probably where I would want to go next, because once we agree that there is a climate change emergency that we absolutely need to be doing something about, that, things are probably going to need to change pretty dramatically in a lot of cases, like, how are you then basically getting that message out there? I know obviously there's quite a variety of things that you do. I've seen things for guys climbing oil rigs, which again is about that stopping industrial production. But I've also seen, like, I think I seen on Facebook like a babies reading group, like somewhere, and I've seen like knitting circles. So there's a pretty big variety.
So there's I mean, essentially one of the things that defines Extinction Rebellion and sets us apart from possibly every other movement that came before us, or most other movements that came before us in the environmental movement, is that we take direct action. We break the law in order to cause disruption. We don't just do an A to B march. Now, there's a theory that people pay more attention to you if you're doing that, if you're actually disrupting their lives. And it can be obviously counterintuitive, because you think if you're going to disrupt someone's life, they're going to turn against you. So this was essentially an experiment. There might have been some research behind it that suggested that this would work, but we had to try it out, and it does appear to be working. Certainly April, like, we had so much success. In the aftermath of that, we got climate emergency declarations from the Scottish Government and the UK Government. Yep. As I say, that's only part of the story. We want them to tell the full truth about what that really means. We want them to go further and take action. Yeah. But it does seem to have had success doing that. So that's one strand. But there's 3 kind of different types of events that Extinction Rebellion will put on. So there's direct action, things like that, where we're causing disruption to try and make a big scene, to try and grab people's attention.
That's my personal favourite type of protest. I like it when people fuck shit up.
Then the second kind of event that we'll put on is an outreach event, where we're basically, we're doing something, we're not disrupting anything, but we're just trying to, again, draw people's attention without breaking the law, and just hand out leaflets, or, talk to people, tell them what we're about, bring them in.
So as well, like the flash mobs and stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. And then the third type of event that we'll put on is what we call a regenerative culture. So this is another of our sort of principles and values where we say we need a regenerative culture. This idea that we look after ourselves, we look after each other. We try and sort of build a prototype for the new kind of society we want to see.
Okay.
And that's where things like reading events come in. You know, cultural sort of arts type events.
Yeah.
Now,
So essentially building a community by having community events.
Exactly.
Aye.
Yeah. Obviously, some of our members are much more involved with one strand than the other, or some of them are across the.
So like the guys that are
board.
like, you know, taking over oil rigs are not
Yeah.
necessarily reading bedtime stories to people.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Fair enough.
It was actually two women that climbed up the oil rig.
All right, sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies.
That's your privilege.
That's me, white privilege.
Cancelled.
Male privilege.
Cancelled next week on Twitter, mate.
Again.
So, like, what's the current state of the education system on this? Like, how much do they speak about this in schools? I feel that there seems to be a generational divide when it comes to this. I mean, I think that for people of our generation, there seems to be probably mine's and Matt's generation, there seems to be more sort of like denial, and then as you go up through the ages, it gets worse and worse and worse. But it seems to be like sort of the younger people, millennials as they'll be known, but then people that are teenagers now in sort of 2018, 2019, 2020 seem to be like the real people that are pushing this. But is there any proactive education in our school system currently around climate crisis, or is it like our history where it's just washed?
Here is the water system between the sea and the clouds and all that kind of stuff you used to get in science, or is there an actual, like, so here is the reality of the world you live in right now?
I mean, it's a long time since I was at school, so I honestly don't
So
know.
there's no actual like research or anything getting or news getting put out there that they're changing.
I'm
like
honestly not aware of what the situation is in the
fair
schools.
enough.
I mean, I remember when I was at school, something that I look back on now and think, yeah, that was wrong. Like, when I was at school, we were taught about renewable energy, and we weren't taught about the fact that the planet is warming, and this might just have been my school in my science class, but we weren't taught about global warming. We were taught about the idea that there's a finite amount of oil and gas and coal, and because of that, sorry, we're going to need to move away from fossil fuels because they're finite.
And we're going to run out.
And that's where the word renewable comes from, because it's not going to run out because it can be renewed.
Yeah.
Now, therefore, we've got this idea that renewables are always good, but one form of renewables is what they call biofuels, which is essentially burning trees. Now, that's still burning carbon and putting carbon into the atmosphere.
Seriously? I'm totally oblivious to the fact. I always thought biofuels was like, you know, microorganisms generating gases and stuff like that. No, like burning trees. That's a good rebrand. Somebody's rebranded that one well, so they have.
Yeah. So there's a company called Drax who are who they operate a plant. I think they're in the process of building new plants, burning basically wood pellets. And this is obviously branded as, you know, this green, sustainable new initiative, but you're still burning carbon.
Yeah.
You just didn't wait for it to be in the ground a few million years first.
I think then that comes
The
down
PR
to...
guy must be a genius. I'm sorry, man. That's
Or
like,
what that-
how do they get away with that?
I think what that comes down to is what is the problem? So the problem there is we're running out of oil and coal. We need an alternative to keep the wheels turning. Whereas the actual issue is that we need to stop burning carbon and we need to stop damaging the planet. So, I mean, I think that, for me, if somebody was to say to me 5 minutes ago, biofuel, I would think that's a good thing. Like that's the...
Sounds brilliant.
That was the type of thing that we get told maybe in the 90s, like when I was at school as well, that this is the future, that will be bioenergy and renewable energies. And it's weird to hear that there are renewable energies that are really bad, because I've never heard anybody really talk about that.
No, I kind of see that. It's been a bit of revelatory information for me.
Off the back of that, like, what are the ideal energies that we should be using to sort of like fuel our economy and like keep our planet moving?
Well, it does come down to renewable. See, I've just gone and said the word that I've just told you. It comes down to things like solar energy, tidal, wind. Now, there's problems with some of these, particularly solar, requires a lot of the rare earth metals that I was talking about earlier, with the mining and the human rights abuses and the environmental damage in other parts of the world that come from that. So these are the solutions, and we do need to invest in these, and there's probably going to need to be some amount of batteries as well involved, which, again, it comes down to this, what they call extractivism, which can be very damaging in other parts of the world. So we can't just say that all we need to do is switch our energy source from being burning carbon to being wind and solar and wave and tidal. We also need to reduce the amount of energy that we use, because while we are sort of transitioning, while we are building all of the infrastructure to get all of this renewable electricity, there's a cost with all of that.
There have been successful examples. I think, was it Portugal that went at one point for, was it a month or something like that, without fossil fuels? There are countries that have made sort of strides that we can maybe look to as examples in this area.
I would be interested to see what the recommendations would be to reduce your consumption of energy, rather than this, because that's a real world thing that I can do. But telling me to go and check out how I reduce my carbon footprint, I'm not really that interested in that, because I don't know what it means. Do you know what I mean? I would be like, no, tell me the actual action
things that
I can do right now to bring that down. I'm pretty sure that running a podcasting studio at your bedroom and lights and stuff probably isn't the best fucking thing for me to be reducing my consumption.
Again, though, it's not coming down to each of us as individuals doing what we can to reduce our consumption. It's about the system changing so that people in general can live with much less consumption. If each of us was to just try and have the lowest kind of carbon footprint we could have, we'd drive ourselves crazy. You go to the supermarket and be like, oh, I can't buy that. It's come from Israel. That's too far away. There's too much of a carbon footprint on that. And you'd have to try and only buy things which are from really close, but also you can't have anything that's meat or dairy, because guess what? That's got more of a carbon footprint than the vegetarian
you'd end up just chasing your tail.
You would spend all your energy doing that, where it might be better to spend your energy pushing for the system to change.
But I think that's the situation that we're currently finding ourselves in, and I think that a lot of people are kicking back, and I think that I can see both sides of it. I can see why, but I think currently we're in a situation where you've got a group of people who feel that they are doing everything they can and that everybody around about them needs to do the same, but then the opposite side of that coin is that you've got other people who are just so disengaged by it because it seems
So I mean, that's scary. I mean, I'm on board with the climate change message completely, and even for me, the type of change that's being talked about is a scary prospect. And I think there is probably part of me that can maybe understand the mentality of some of the folk who are maybe deniers, because it's maybe that they don't believe it or that they don't agree that change happened, but the notion of what we're talking about here is so scary to people that it's so big. You know what I mean? I don't know. I personally don't know how we address that myself. Education and the truth is definitely a start, but we definitely could be doing more on that front, I think, to be honest with you.
I think that's probably bang on, where people just feel like it's just a fear-based response. Any time that I've ever spoke to somebody about sort of the climate crisis, and I've got members of my family who they're too busy dealing with their day-to-day life and too busy dealing with the challenges that they face and the current economics and everything else that goes with that, whether it be Scottish independence, Brexit, World War III, that just all sort of totally dominates people's minds. And so when you come to them and they're a taxi driver, for instance, I remember my family's a taxi driver, and you talk about this is what needs to happen, a complete change of lifestyle, we need to stop driving cars, and it just scares the living fucking shit out of them, I think.
I mean, one of the things that makes it really hard for us is, and where we do have trouble kind of reaching people is we're talking about things that are maybe 10, 20, 30 years down the line. and people have got lives, people have got problems today and tomorrow and next week, and it's hard to kind of engage with something which seems so abstract and so far away. But we do need to deal with it now, so that's one of the kind of challenges that we face.
It's a huge challenge, that, because it's asking people. It's asking people to look into the future. And you do get people where they'll just be like, I don't care. I don't care about that. I can't do anything about it, so I'm just putting it in that bucket of I don't give a shit. And when they see the protests, or when, I mean, me and Matt were talking before you turned up this afternoon about I found it mind blowing when the guy jumped on top of the tube in London. And they pulled him down and started kicking into him. I was like, yous are the sheep. Yous are literally the turkeys that are voting for Christmas here. Like, this is going to impact you just as much as it does the guy up there. And he's trying to tell you a message, and your response is, I need to get to my job. Get the fuck off the top of that. You're disrupting my life. Get off. And in fact, I'm going to kick you in the head for trying to do that. I just found that incredible.
There was a lot of shoot the messenger in this.
Yeah, that was a really tough kind of episode for Extinction Rebellion, that particular action and the response to it. And we got a lot of criticism because it was the wrong target. We were disrupting people in a working class area of London, trying to get to work, who in all likelihood would be losing wages by not turning up in time for work. If we'd done the same thing in Canary Wharf, most of the people have got a salary, and if they turn up an hour late for work, they don't care. Well, they probably do care because they think their job matters. But
for anybody who works at Canary Wharf, of which I've got a mate, your job doesn't matter, mate. Aye, Greg works at.
Okay.
But that's a good point. Like, I think that's.
I think in my own queue, way like the blockades are like, fuel depots and these types of things. I think the vision of the industrial complex in the background with you guys out front with your banners and your unity and your message is a much more agreeable sort of image.
So when we were formed, we had this thing that we call the theory of change, about how we were going to bring about change and how our actions were going to make this happen. And it was all about causing disruption in the capital city, causing disruption in London. And it's something that we're now spending a lot of time and effort looking at and thinking about, because it was so successful in April. We didn't really seem to get anywhere in October. It felt almost like we went backwards in terms of public sympathy in October. And when you talk about targeting industrial sites, this is a new thing. We weren't doing that before. We haven't kind of like formally changed our strategy yet, but we're in the process of doing that. I'm actually going to a meeting after this where we're talking about XR Scotland. What is our strategy going to be? We've got some proposals we're going to discuss and kind of feedback on. But yeah, we do need to put some work in to think about our strategy, to think about our message. We're still a very, very young organisation. We're still less than a year and a half old. So
I can't believe that, actually.
Considering the actual growth and how widespread the organisation, I mean, it became a global name overnight, and like that does put a lot of pressure on you to keep the ball moving, I suppose. But it is, as you say, it's really important that as you move in the right manner, because we've already talked about examples where one tiny wee step over a perceived line, and it does more harm than good. So it's a balancing act. You've got a really tough message to get out there, and it almost feels like you've got to get that message out while sort of standing on a tightrope a lot of the time.
We don't have time to make mistakes, really. I mean, we just have to keep going. We do have to do that sort of reflection and look back and think about stuff and come up with a better plan. But while we're doing that, we need to keep working. We need to do. It's almost like, and I feel like with the whole kind of response to the climate emergency, we need to do everything all the time. Like what we find so much on our social media, we'll post about an action and we'll get someone will comment on it and say, you need to talk about cycling. You need to talk about, like, that's the only that, like, just get people to stop driving and start cycling. Or you'll get someone who comes on and say, you need to be talking about a plant-based diet. That's all that matters. If everyone had a plant-based diet, we'd be fine. Or they'll be talking about the fast fashion industry. You shut down the fast fashion industry and we'll be fine. And the reality is that if you just do any one of those things, we're still fucked.
Nothing changes.
We need to do all of the things.
All the time.
Yeah. And so there's no solution that we can afford to say.
There's no cookie cutter.
Yeah.
There's no like one thing that we can do that will just be like, that's it, guys. High five.
And then you can't even if you find yourself, for example, in a Scotland where, you know, we're going, do you know what? Things are still to happen. Things can be better. We're electrifying A9s and all these other things that, you know, in theory should have an impact as we move towards the sort of net zero 2025, which I know obviously we were going to kind of touch on. But like, success in just Scotland doesn't then necessarily mean whatever model we use here will go and work in India or Pakistan, or it won't go and work in America or Australia. You know what I mean? Like, so it's all going to be effective, but it's also in a lot of cases going to have to be really regionalised as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because the challenges that Australia faced in recent months with the wildfires are nothing by comparison. I mean, our problem is that we're probably going to be looking at, you know, huge swathes of the country underwater rather than on fire. You know what I mean? Like, and I think as well as the environmental issues and, you know, the impacts that it's having, like, one of the things that we need to consider, and I know Extinction Rebellion Scotland, we're talking about it through the last couple of days, as, you know, temperatures in Scotland start to move towards 30 degrees in the summer, like, migration is going to be a huge issue as people's homes disappear underwater, never to come back. Like, we're going to have massive health issues. We're going to have supply and demand issues. Like, this isn't just something that is like, oh, it's going to be a bit warm and dry and we're going to run out of oil and, you know, whatever. This is something that is going to bleed out and impact on every aspect of people's lives everywhere in the world. And we're going to have to then address, well, what do we do when 2/3 of a country floods? What do we do with the people? You know what I mean? Like, there's questions that we're not even getting to yet. You know what I mean? Like,
So to pick up on, because I don't think we've talked about 2025 yet, and it's a big thing that some people look at and they're like, "Are you serious? You're calling for net zero carbon emissions by 2025?" I don't know exactly how we get there. That's one of the great things about the proposal for a citizens' assembly, is that you don't necessarily have to have that answer. You say we're gonna let the people come together and decide based on the ideas that are put forward by experts. But I believe that research has been done that shows that it can be done, that a transition of that scale can be done in that sort of time. And if you look at the likes of the Second World War, if you look at how quickly our economy was redirected, for instance, in the space of 6 weeks, factories that were making car engines were suddenly making engines for planes for the war effort. So
these drastic changes and these big, massive things that we've just been talking about can be done. Be done. Like, they've got the resources, we've got the manpower. Like, we could do it. It's just a case. It's a choice then, really, isn't it?
And the other thing that people bring up is, so there's the IPCC report from 2018, the one that really made so many people sit up and take notice, because they are an organisation that often comes out with quite conservative sort of things, and they just came out and said, you need to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030, you need to hit net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in order to have a 50% chance of staying within 1.5 degrees. Now, if they're saying we've got till 2050, why are we saying 2025? Well, there's two reasons. The first reason is that net zero is not zero. Net zero means that you've got a spreadsheet with two columns. In one column, you've got all your carbon emissions, and then in the other column, you've got all your offsets.
Yeah.
Now, the offsets, a lot of this can be quite questionable. You've got carbon capture and storage, which is still a very unproven technology, which there's risks about carbon leaching back out into the atmosphere. You've got things where you plant a tree, and in theory, that tree lives for 40 years, it sequesters this much carbon, but you maybe plant the tree and then you don't look after it and it dies after a year. So this whole idea of carbon offsetting can be questionable. It's often used as a sort of accounting trick so that governments and companies can claim to be greener than they actually are.
Right.
So net zero is not the same thing as absolute zero, where we're not emitting anything. So while net zero is definitely a good thing and something that we should be trying to get to as soon as possible, it's not the final destination. It's a step on the road to something better. So that's the first reason. The second reason why we talk about 2025 is that we are one of the wealthiest, most advanced countries in the world. Now, if the world as a whole is going to get there by 2050, we need to be getting there much sooner than that. And that's why we're saying we can get there by 2025, and we should, so that we can set an example. We can show the rest of the world that it can be done, and also set an example for some ideas of how it can be done. Now, obviously, as you say, different countries will have to do different things, but different countries can see what we've done and learn from it. And going back to the first part of that as well, is show that it can be done. Show that we are doing it, because one of the hardest things is if Scotland was to get to zero carbon emissions and no other country did anything, we'd still be fucked.
Yeah.
So we need to trust that other countries are going to do it, and other countries need to trust that we're going to do it. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of trying to go on a diet and then you start to think, is this actually working? And then the moment you start thinking, maybe it's not working, maybe it's not, or maybe I'm not going to lose weight, you can't stick with it. Because it's really hard to do. So if it's really hard to do, you need to believe that it's going to work. And so countries need to believe that other countries are going to do it. And so it's so important for somebody to be first and to get in there quickly and set an example. And, you know, we can't force the Australian government to take action. We can't force the American government to take action.
Exactly.
We can put pressure on the Scottish government. We can put pressure on the UK government.
And hope that the Scottish or UK government sets an example that then puts pressure on other countries to follow suit.
Exactly.
Aye. I mean, as it stands, as we talk about these deadlines and stuff like that, how optimistic, pessimistic, etc. are you? Maybe no as a representative of Extinction Rebellion, but just on a personal level, what do you reckon?
I don't even know. I try not to think about it. I guess that means I probably don't really.
Right.
It's hard to see. It's hard to see it happening, but so much has happened in the last year and a half that we never saw happening.
Yeah.
In global politics in the last 5 years, you know, you look at 2016 and what a shock to the system that was. The things that people did not expect.
Look at the dysphoria we now live in. Pure nightmarish hellscape.
So just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But one of the big kind of discussions that can get very emotional that we sometimes talk about in Extinction Rebellion is the subject of hope. And do you have hope? Are you optimistic? And for me, I think it's less. I try to think less about hope and more about purpose.
Okay.
A sense of, do I believe that what I'm doing is right? Do I believe that what I'm doing is the best thing I can do to give us the best chance? And I then look around at other people around me doing these things, doing more than I'm doing. You know, there's some amazing people in our organisation who just, I don't know how they manage to put in all the work that they do.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope.
Cool. I think that's as good an answer as any.
I think so, man. I think that's a great place to end it as well, after we've just been talking about what seems to be quite a heavy topic, but obviously it's laden with quite a lot of sort of pessimism and quite a lot of sort of just to hear that the people that are within your organisation are giving you that hope just as a sort of third party gives me hope that we might be able to do something about it. And
I've got to say, watching, you know, the progress, as you say, that's been made in the last 18 months, you know, on a global level through organisations like Extinction Rebellion and the people they associate themselves with, is probably one of the few rays of hope on this topic that I've actually seen in, you know, probably in my adult life. You know what I mean? Like, I know early years there's been good spells for guys like Greenpeace and stuff like that, but this feels to me like a more organic thing that's happening. This feels to me like actual ordinary people saying, no, fuck this, man, this is no on anymore. And like, given how vested other interests like political and industrial interests are, like, it's going to take ordinary people going, no, I'm not having that anymore, for it to actually stick. And, you know, hopefully these are the spark that sets off something bigger.
Where can people find you if they're looking to engage?
Extinction Rebellion Glasgow have got a Facebook page. Extinction Rebellion Scotland are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. We have weekly meetings every Tuesday evening from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock. At the moment those are at Strathclyde Uni, but that venue might change. The details of all of our events can be found on our Facebook page.
Amazing. Thanks very much for coming and talking to us.
I really appreciate it. This is one we've been, as we said, at the turn of the year when we sat down, we were desperate to get a wee bit of this type of chat in, so we really appreciate your time.
All right, thanks for having me on.